cost of attending class. See, and so the marginal cost equals the marginal benefit at a different quantity. Okay? Hey, by putting the lectures online, see, people, it's not, the marginal benefit of being in class is not as high as it otherwise would be. All right, so sorry about that. For those of you squinting to see what I wrote up here, I'll tell you. It's one of the disadvantages of being in the pit, as they call this classroom. It's kind of a long way to look there. Of course, you're free to move down, but for some of you at least. All right, let's just start off by a brief discussion of the Coase theorem in the context of this question posed by the authors. Remember, these are their PowerPoint slides as a starting point, and then I tweak them and adjust them and revise them. And if you copied them, for example, you might have just a teensy-weensy different version of it. Oh, pretty high. Higher than usual. Hello. Oh well. You might have a slightly different version of the PowerPoint than what I'm showing here, because every time I look at it, I find some little thing to tweak and change a word here, change a word there, which isn't entirely bad from your perspective, because that means you should have your pen out and you should be making little arrows there for the new words and stuff, and that helps engrave it in your brain, which is a good thing. All right, now, one of the things that I said last time about the Coase theorem being potentially limited in its applicability is, okay, suppose your neighbor loves his loud stereo late at night, and the city has declared quiet hours from 10 to 6, so that if it's after 10, you could ask him to knock it off, and if he doesn't, or she doesn't, you could call the cops on him. Okay, so the Coase said under those circumstances, the two parties will get together and negotiate a deal where, depending on how much you love your quiet and how much they love their music after 10 o'clock, would affect the terms. But in any event, there'd be a little bit more music a little bit after 10 than otherwise would probably be the case, and you would get some money from them for tolerating it, and you'd forego some money by insisting on them cutting it off a little sooner than they otherwise would like to, right? So I mean, that's the bargaining process. So what was wrong with that? Well, one thing that's wrong with it is another one of your neighbors might discover your deal and say, oh, I could just crank my stereo up and, right? And well, no, actually it doesn't work in that case, but somebody else could move, given the property rights, got my examples, given the property rights, somebody else could move into the area and say, you know, your stereo bugs me too, pay. Right? Another neighbor, for example, if it's an apartment building. Okay, now the flip side is, here's my other example comes in, suppose the city says, hey, there are no rules governing this case. Your neighbor can play their stereo as much as they want, as loud as they want. There's no law stopping them. And then you say, okay, how badly do I want to move? Not all that badly. I better go talk to my neighbor. Okay, maybe we can negotiate something to where there's a little less music and not quite so late and not quite so loud, and how am I going to pull this off given that he has the perfect right to do whatever they want? Pay him. Okay, make it worth their while. Could you, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble competing with that later, please. Okay, so you could induce, okay, so then the problem is the other example that I got into before I realized I had it backwards, and okay, well then somebody else says, hey, I'll move into the area and I'll demand a payment. Okay, so there are entry-exit issues that preclude the usefulness of the Coase theorem in some cases. Now, what about an example like this? See, this is a one-time deal. Okay, so we don't have these entry-exit issues of somebody wanting to play their stereo every night, or almost every night, all of the time. It's just a one-time deal or a rare deal. So what do? You go over and talk to your neighbor and say, look, we'd like to party tonight, and I know it's going to be loud, but everybody at the party will chip in for $1 and pay you $50 to go out for the night or grin and bear it. How about it? Okay, and so $50, yeah, a little louder, yeah, I could go out to eat or something and come back, and yeah, no problem. Okay? So they would negotiate a deal. And you wouldn't have that problem of somebody else is going to move into the area or somebody else is going to demand a payment after they discover your deal, in most cases. Now, maybe there's more than one neighbor, so you might have to rustle up a little bit more money to pay them all off, right, or to negotiate a deal with all of them, which raises the next issue on the slide of maybe it's just too big of a hassle to do this, because maybe there's a bunch of elderly neighbors, and each one of them has slightly different preferences, and some of them are going to hold out, right, and say, the money involved here, I just don't want to tolerate the noise, and I don't want to spend the time talking to you about it. Never mind, just shut it down at 10 o'clock when the quiet hours law kicks in. Okay, there goes the party. Okay, so in cases where there are high transaction costs, the Coase theorem doesn't work. It breaks down. It isn't the basis for achieving efficiency. So what do you do then if it's policy relevant? You gotta have your EPA, okay, Environmental Protection Agency, or whatever it's called at the state or local level. You have to have a government agency in some cases jump in there and act on behalf of the many sufferers, or usually the sufferers, rather than have the sufferers somehow figure out a way to band together and negotiate, which could be a real hassle. A real hassle is just a modern term, a nicer term, I think, for transaction costs. Right? Transaction cost means it's a hassle. It's difficult. We've got to get everybody to agree on our position before we can even go over and negotiate with the other side, and then as the negotiations go on, maybe we have to get together again, never mind. Okay? So anyway, that's the essence of the Coase theorem. There are cases where, for example, the first bullet item up there, where that's the right thing to do, keep the government out of it, okay, keep the costs down. Because see, the problem with the second bullet there is it's got to be a pretty bad problem to be policy relevant, right? Because getting the government in on it is costly. It's not just costly because you have to spend a lot of money to get it done. It's, hey, we're chipping away at our individual liberties, right? Every time we give the government power to do something, we pay that cost on top of the actual cost of running the agency. That is something we need to take seriously. If for no other reason, then there's a very strong correlation between freedom and prosperity. The countries in the world that have chipped away a lot at individual liberties tend to be the poor ones. Right? When people have freedom to act on market prices and have secure property rights, tends to be quite a bit more prosperity. But I would argue that's not the only reason to guard your individual liberties. All right, so when the private solutions don't work, the government can step in, your EPA solution, and here are the ways in which they might step forward. If you're looking at this model right here, okay, this would be one way to decide how to step forward. You would use what's called a Pigovian tax. See, it's the next slide where it uses that term. Yeah, there it is. Okay, that's how you spell Pigovian. Okay, so anyway, it's in your book, and we'll get to that slide in a minute. Pigovian taxes or Pigovian subsidies. Right, in the case of a spillover cost or negative externality or negative spillover, yes, you're saying, Doc, why don't you just give me one phrase for it? Hey, you're here to learn, and how do I know which way that this issue will be labeled when you come across it in the real world? Right? Any one of those is the way it might come out of somebody's mouth or on a piece of paper. And if I only use one term, if I don't ever use the word spillover and just the word externality, and somebody starts talking about spillovers, all of this lesson may have been for naught. Right? Because you won't say, what spillovers? What on earth what's they talking about? Sounds a little bit like what my economics professor was talking about back in November of 2015. Is it the same thing? You'll wonder, and by then, it's over your head and gone. So, it is important to understand. I think all the questions are in terms of externalities or external costs, all the questions in the homework in the exam, but it's important to recognize what the common synonyms are for that, so that the learning that you do applies no matter which terms somebody uses to communicate the issue. All right, so the Pigovian tax means set the tax equal to the marginal external cost. And you ask, well, what's the marginal external cost? Okay, the equilibrium amount of anything, right, the result of people acting on freedom, okay, is where the marginal private cost equals the marginal private benefit. So to make the optimum be the equilibrium, or to make the equilibrium be the optimum, we have to set a tax, a per unit tax, dollars per ton, equal to what's called the marginal external cost, which is the difference between the marginal social cost and marginal private cost at the optimum. Now, the way that I've been drawing the graphs and the way that all of them will be drawn that you'll see for this course, the lines are parallel, which means the MSC minus MPC is the same at all quantities, which means you don't have to worry about whether it's at the optimum or some other quantity. You just, 8 minus 3, okay. The marginal external cost is 5 in that graph. Okay? So assuming the government has all of this information, that they hired good economists to estimate these things, not a trivial task at all, especially given the fact that the data is never contemporaneous. In other words, you'll never have data for right now. It's always a month late or a year later. You can't find 2015 data for anything because 2015 isn't over, right? So how are you going to set the tax for 2016? Well, you rely on 2014 data and 2013 data, and things change. Anyway, it's a non-trivial task in the real world to estimate these two things and thus to estimate this number, but similar to the jokes that are occasionally told about economists, we'll assume we were able to do it. Right? The economists stuck on the desert island, they have this little can of beans that washed up with them, and they look at each other and they say, let's assume we have a can opener. A tough crowd at first thing in the morning. Anyway, so here we go. We levy this tax, and because the optimum is 70, pay attention now in case you can't see this tiny little number here. Okay, this is a 70. Okay, understand it's way back there. Okay, a 70. The optimal quantity is 70, so the tax, this Pigovian tax on the good X, which has external costs associated with it in a free market. Okay, so the whole idea of the Pigovian tax is for the external costs to no longer be external. The tax internalizes that cost. Okay, by setting the tax equal to this, we internalize it. Okay, so externalities don't last forever. The whole idea of the policy is for them to go away, to be eliminated by charging ultimately the consumer for the full social marginal cost of their purchase. Okay, anyway, it'll raise $350 in revenue, and what's the point of the revenue? Well, it has two uses, right, which achieves the efficiency. Damage reduction, marginal benefits versus marginal costs, right? There may be some uses of the money that mitigate against the effects of this MSC minus MPC difference. Let's say it's pollution. Let's say the reason for the MSC bigger than MPC is because there are emissions into the air as a byproduct of making X. Okay, so some of the $350 might be used to clean up some of those damages, to clean up some of those effects. Maybe soot is being deposited on buildings as a result of that. Okay, so some of the money might be used to clean up the buildings every once in a while. Okay, and depending on how much of that money can be wisely used in that way, some of it may be left over as just indirect or even in some cases direct compensation. Okay, so damage mitigation and compensation are the two uses of the money. Okay, now, I guarantee not everybody is sure where that 350 came from. Okay, I don't know any new way to say it other than the way that I just did. So provide me a little more detail of, Doc, where on earth did that 350 come from? Eric?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, if you have a tax, it's levied on the thing being taxed, okay? So the amount of X that transacts subject to the tax, once the tax is in place, is 70. Okay, so in the nomenclature of taxes, this is the tax base. Okay, if there's a tax on X, the tax base is, well, how much X is there? Okay, now you could multiply by the 100, and that'll be one of the wrong answers on the test, is to multiply by that number. And in fact, that's the law in most places, to multiply by the initial tax base, to not assume that the tax base is affected because it's not easy to figure out by how much it will be affected. But in this case, the whole idea is to affect the amount, right? So you can't ignore that the quantity will be reduced. Okay, so 70 units taxed at $5 each, $350. 5 times 70. Yeah, maybe you didn't do the math in your head. Okay, so and per time period. So if this is tons per week, then it's $350 per week. Anybody else? That my second attempt there with Eric. You still don't get where the 350 can be. Sam Donaldson, it's okay. That's why you made the trip through the rain today, and that's why I'm here today, is to clarify that which you didn't get based on what I just said or what was written in the book.
Is that given information at the bottom?
Say what?
Is that given information at the bottom of the 5?
I heard what you said.
Are you taking it away from the 8 and the 3?
Yeah, that's how you get the 5. Is the tax, which should be equal to the marginal external cost, is equal to this difference at the optimum. But the lines are parallel, so it doesn't. I mean, it is equal to 5 at the optimum. Yeah, I didn't mark it in here. Okay, so we could do that. Maybe that might have been what it was. But the lines are parallel, so you can just use this spot, the 8 and 3. Okay, all the cases that we're going to do will have the lines be parallel, but they're not always. Okay, so again, you're here to learn, so just in case they're not parallel, which MSC minus MPC, you would wonder, oh, this one, the one that's at the optimum. Right, in case the lines are not parallel. Okay, that's where you go to find the right tax. Okay, it's not a complication that's important to our mission at the moment, which is to learn the basic concept. But later on in life, when you apply it, it might not be as nice and clean and simple as the classroom version of it. More Q&A. Q&A is good. There's always the question multiplier. There's always people who don't know and wouldn't ask to save their lives. I have never understood it, but there it is. Yes?
And the 350 is the total of the tax that's gained from the tax?
Say again?
The 350 is the gain from the tax. Okay.
The gain from the tax. It's the revenue generated by it. I'm hesitant to use the word gain because we usually think of that like consumer surplus or producer surplus and gains from trade. So it's the revenue from the tax. It's the compensation to society for the damages done, some of which might be wisely used to diminish those damages. Okay? But not necessarily the whole $350. It might not be smart to spend the whole $350 that way, because at the margin, the additional money might be worth more used some other way than cleaning up the damages a little bit more. Think of the soot example with the building. At some point, scrubbing a little more soot out of the building, out of some little crack that nobody can see, right, might cost a lot more than it would be worth to anybody. Better to use the money some other way. Pay cops, okay? Buy new fire engines, pay for the Army, build a stadium, whatever. A lot of different uses of governmental money. Now, one use of governmental money that's particularly important here is the other graph, right? The positive spillovers. Okay? The economically efficient thing to do if it's policy relevant, like keeping a nasty disease from spreading as much, okay, is to provide a subsidy equal to, just like what you've written there, and I'll write it up in a minute, S equals ME, marginal external benefit, MEB, Okay, MSB minus MPB. I'll write it in a minute, but it's just, it's parallel to that. The difference between the MSB and MPB line is a subsidy, right? Or efficiency is achieved by having a subsidy equal to the marginal external benefit. But wait a minute, a subsidy, that's money. Where do we get the money from? Well, we could get it from income tax or property tax, just regular revenues. Wait a minute. A couple chapters ago, we learned that those create deadweight loss, and the mission here is to eliminate a deadweight loss. Doesn't make much sense to create a deadweight loss to eliminate another one. See, that's the connection between these two graphs. The money from this, some of it, maybe all of it, again, depending on the damage issue or how you want to do the compensating. The money from the taxes on what were externalities, right? But tax eliminates them, internalizes them. The money can be used to finance the subsidies over here. See, it's smart to take money that eliminates a deadweight loss to eliminate another deadweight loss. It's not smart to take money that creates a deadweight loss to eliminate a deadweight loss. Kind of spinning your wheels, right? Okay, so, and Q&A is good. That's more important than me blabbering. Okay, although part of the Q&A is me blabbering, right? I mean, after you ask the question, I give it a shot on saying it differently. That makes it go on. Oh, we got to do our thumbs up or down too. Don't forget that, because that's the only way I'm sure if you didn't just give up on my explanation or actually got it. Right? That makes sure that Sam Donaldson thing is taken all the way to where it needs to be. Okay, so one other point, something you need to be able to do for the homework and the test and in the real world to judge policy relevance is to estimate the free market deadweight loss. The first part of that, of course, is to understand what's a free market deadweight loss. Well, the free market equilibrium is where MPB is equal to MPC, that's here. At that quantity, which I, just for number crunching sake, I said is 100. Right, what does that mean? That means the 100th unit of X per week has just enough has just enough additional benefit to cover the additional cost. That's why the equilibrium is 100 and not 101 or 99. The 100th one per week is just enough to cover the opportunity cost of making it. Okay, it's the last ton per week that adds to the overall gains from trade. But in this case, it's only because some costs were not internalized, were overlooked. Okay, because at 100, at Q sub E, the marginal cost to society is more than the marginal benefit to society. From unit 71 to 100, for the last 30 tons per week, the opportunity cost, what was given up to produce it, was more than the benefit of having it. Okay, so that defines our deadweight loss to be this area right here. Okay, so for these spillovers to be policy relevant, the fix, okay, the machinery to generate the fix, right, running the EPA, for example, would be, one of the ways to fix it if the spillover here is pollution, has to be cost less than this deadweight loss for it to be policy relevant. Right, we're going to avoid these losses by moving the equilibrium from 100 to 70 through the Pagovian tax. Well, if that costs more than this, then don't do it. The world is full of imperfections. Some of them are not worth fixing. Okay, so what's the size of the deadweight loss here? 5 times 30 divided by 2 is 75. Okay, 30, 100 minus 70. Okay, one dimension of the triangle, and then the 5, okay, which is the same here. 16 minus 11, 5. Okay, 5 times 30 is 150, divided by 2, 75. Okay, a long pause here to make sure nobody says, well, he just goes through that stuff so fast, I can't keep up. Yes, you can. It helps to skim the chapter a little bit before class, because then you don't have the out of the blue problems that I call it. I write that on documents a lot when I'm proofreading them, not necessarily my own, although that happens too. I'm reading somebody else and said, where did this come from? That just came out of the blue. Some new concept introduced. So if you're sitting in class and I'm talking about something, you've never heard of it, right? You suffer the kind of like, what on earth is an externality and Pagovian tax? Who's Pagoo? Right? Now, if you'd skimmed that a little bit in the book, you would have avoided that shock, which sometimes shuts the brain down for a while. See, I'm stalling for time here in case you want to formulate a question or muster up the courage to ask it. Okay, a couple of more items on the list: commanded control and tradable allowances. I'll wait to get to those a couple slides down when they're addressed. Okay, so I think this is what I've just been saying here the last few minutes, but there it is on black on white. Just in case, read it, and say, oh yeah, that's what he was just talking about, or what? Yeah, if it's the what reaction, then it's, wait a minute, Doc, did you just talk about imposing taxes to reduce the market quantity to the efficient level? Yeah. Maybe it wasn't clear. And let's work on that. Okay, so here's that, those terms: Pagovian tax, Pagovian subsidy. Wouldn't you love to have a tax or subsidy named after you? Mr. Pagoo or Professor Pagoo, well, he came up with this notion, and so there it is. All right, so what we're saying here with these Pagovian taxes and subsidies is the price system is a powerful mechanism. Chapter 7, remember we talked about the price system. It coordinates all this economic activity. If we don't have the prices right, it will mess up that coordinating of economic activity. Right? So we need the signals to be correct. They're powerful signals to inform and motivate, to inform people about how scarce something is, and to motivate them to care about it. Okay, so for bad spillovers, right, the tax to shift the equilibrium to the optimum. And for good spillovers, getting more of something, okay, we want to shift the equilibrium higher to a larger number. Right? We want more people to get their flu shots. So maybe we subsidize it so that we can say, go get your flu shots, they're free. They're not free. Somebody had to pay for the vaccine and all of that, the person to administer it and everything. But they want society generally to pay for it so that at the point of delivery it's no additional charge, so that more people get their flu shots and don't get the flu and spread it to other people. Okay, see, that's the external benefit. You're motivated already to get your flu shot because then you won't get it. But you're not motivated enough in some cases because you're not taking into account all the other people that won't get it if you don't get it. Okay, that's that external benefit thing. Oh, real quickly here, let's talk about how big the subsidy should be. Right? There's no x-axis place to label it, but look at that. Now we can tell. I promised to write that stuff down in there. So S equals okay, so just like over there, only now we're talking about something good, and we want to subsidize it if we can find a money source for it that doesn't generate another deadweight loss. Right, so a money source like this one. Okay, so the subsidy per unit, it's not the lump sum, it's a per unit subsidy. And in this case, right, based on this graph, it should be 7. Right, because the one place where we can tell for sure how much difference there is at the optimum, where the marginal social cost is 13 and the marginal private benefit is 6. Okay, or the thing that you're supposed to be comparing, the MSB and the MPB, right? 13 minus 6, 7. Okay, so the subsidy cost to us, right? Government, that's us. Okay, is $7 per unit. And once we put in the subsidy, how many units will there be saying, give me $7, 100? Now again, you might be tempted just to multiply by the 60, saying, hey, that's how many units of it are being done when we're sitting here contemplating levying this subsidy or providing this subsidy. But then once you do, then you're going to achieve the thing that you did it for, namely it's going to increase, and so you have to pay all of the quantity, all of the users, their $7. Okay, so $700 is the amount of money that will cost. 7 times 100. Let's see, what did I write over here? Okay, so, oops, I guess, okay, that's the 7, and then 7 times. And the dead weight loss that we have to consider as the reason whether this is policy relevant or not is, if we don't do this, we will suffer a loss for not doing as much of this as we should. And that would be $210. See, I say it that way first before writing it down. It's because I want you to see if you understand where the 210 came from. Okay, I want you to take a moment to write down, if this was a test question, how would you find the dead weight loss? What things would you do? And are you coming up with 210 or coming up with something else? See, that's the first stage in purging that potential mistake from your list of all the mistakes you're still going to make in your life. You're going to make a bunch. Well, hopefully we'll reduce that by 1, hopefully. Okay, $210. Okay, so see, at the equilibrium, the result of people enjoying their freedom to buy as much of something as they want to, the marginal social benefit is way above the marginal social cost by $7. This number would be 17, okay, to be consistent with the fact that the difference is 7 here and the lines are parallel. Okay, so again, this would be MSC minus MPC at the optimum, so we better put that here. Okay, and so 7 times, whoops, I did my math wrong, didn't I, in my head? What did I do there, first of all? Yeah, I did it wrong. See, that's the problem with doing this in your head. I said 210, that's not right. 7 times 40, 7 times 40 is 280, and then divide by 2 is 140. I don't know how I came up with the 210. Okay, it's always important to write it down after doing it in your head and possibly messing it up. What did I multiply? Oh, yeah, I multiplied by the 60 rather than this 40 to get my 420 and then divide by 2. Oops, the monitor's in your way, huh? Sorry about that. A little exercise in the morning there. Just stretch. Fun never ends unless you let it. Don't forget that. There you go. Get the whole repertoire in there. All right, see, I know from experience that these are difficult things, is to understand the economics is the first part, and then to translate that into a little bit of math that tests the difference between knowing something and memorizing something is tough, which is why I'm kind of dragging through here, kind of going slow. We'll have some top hat questions here in a minute. So we better leave time for those. We better move on, because maybe that'll be the venue by which we address some of this. Okay, so there it is. This is the graph that's in your book. Okay, and of course it's on this slide that you can download and copy. There it is. Okay, oh, that's for this, the first one. Okay, for the Pavlovian tax. Don't think there's anything on here that's not up there. So notice that the change in the price is not the same as the change in the marginal external cost or benefit. Okay, remember that's in the short run. Remember that from your tax chapter. In the long run, yeah, the tax will be passed on fully, but not right away. Okay, same deal here. Again, fishing for questions. It's all there. But I understand that it may not be clear. In fact, I'm sure of it, having done this long enough. I know that some of you in here are a little fuzzy on some of these things, but I don't know which of you and I don't know which thing. So, tell me. Okay, and as I said, it takes some heavy-duty computational talent to figure out what these functions are, right? A line is kind of a function relating something to something else, and to estimate these statistically is not easy at all. Okay, so as this slide says, it's possible to get screwed up. Okay, screwed up, well, that's a little bit too strong perhaps. They might say, oh, we think it's 5, and maybe in the real world it's 7. Okay, well, so the equilibrium will not be moved all the way exactly to what the optimum truly is, but in the right direction, maybe a little bit too far, maybe not quite far enough, maybe at least to bring the remaining deadweight loss down to policy irrelevance, one of those many life irritations that's just not worth the cost of fixing. Okay, same deal on the subsidy side. Takes some heavy-duty statistical talent, pretty good data to estimate exactly what these two lines would look like in the real world. So we can say what we should do, and this is the first step in doing the statistics, to say, okay, here's what we're trying to find. Okay, but again, giving all those imperfections, we may not subsidize this by the exactly correct amount. All right, the most direct approach and the most popular approach, at least within the government where those final decisions are made, is the command and control method, which says, just again pretending that we're dealing with a negative externality and say it's a pollution problem, the EPA will come along and say, you reduce your emissions 10%, you do it 20%, you do 25%. Okay, commanding an outcome. Now, just 2 chapters ago, we discussed why that could be problematic, right? When we were talking about the price system and central planning. The government isn't that good at figuring out the right quantity of things and keeping that efficient over time. So you're saying, well, but Doc, you just said it's the most popular approach. Well, you know, between economic illiteracy and politicians doing marginal analysis, you know, this is an inertia. This is what we have to start from, at least in fine-tuning. Here's an example of what I mean. The 1990 Clean Air Act added some of this economics to the original Clean Air Act that didn't have much of anything, it had just command and control. Why did it do that? Well, because we recognized after 20 years, Clean Air Act of 1970 till 1990, that we were spending an awful lot of money doing something that seemed like it could be done a lot cheaper. In other words, it was very inefficient. So what we said was, okay, suppose we set the quantities initially, how much emission reduction was going to occur, and then let the folks assigned those quantities trade. In other words, pay or sell the responsibility, buy or sell the responsibility to reduce emissions. What would happen? Well, those with very high costs to reduce emissions would pay somebody with lower emission reduction costs to assume that responsibility, right? And both would be better off, right? If somebody, let's say the marginal cost for one is $50 and the marginal cost for somebody else is $80. Well, the person with the $80 marginal cost says, look, I'll pay you some money here to up your emission control by $50 more cost to them. Okay, pay them $60. They say, ka-ching, works for me. Okay, and the other side says, hey, that's a good deal for me to pay them $60 because I just saved $80, right, if their marginal cost is 80. Okay, so we passed the original Clean Air Act in 1970. It did this command and control regulation. It's the starting point for the tradable allowances, the thing you saw a couple slides ago. We'll talk about that. So we introduced trade on top of the original quantities to make it more cost effective. And here's a principle to go through life with. Efficiency requires equal marginal costs when there are multiple participants. That's true for anything, all the time, forever. Okay, as I just illustrated with the 50 and the 80. Anytime the marginal cost of doing something differs among the different sets or groups of people doing it, there are savings to be had, which means it's inefficient unless you have those trades. Okay, so I'll repeat it again. If there are multiple participants involved in achieving some overall goal, efficiency requires that the marginal costs be the same among all the participants. If not, then you can move emission control in this example, but it could be producing steel, cars, anything, right? There are many producers of cars. What will produce an efficient outcome in terms of the total amount of cars produced? Equal marginal costs among General Motors and Ford and Chrysler and everybody else producing cars. If that weren't the case, then we should send increased production to the low marginal cost producer, less production, the high marginal cost producer, and we get the same total result for a lesser total cost. Okay, equal marginal costs is a general principle of efficiency, cost minimization to achieve an overall result. It's the same on the benefit side. You want the maximum total benefit out of a given quantity of something that you have available. What's the rule there? Equal marginal benefits. Otherwise, you could move it from one person to another and the same amount of overall stuff and achieve a higher level of overall benefit. Right? You move stuff from low marginal benefit to high marginal benefit. Right? I did that at the dinner table last night. I told my wife, I said, dear, my marginal utility for this is much lower than yours, marginal benefit. Okay? You had the last slice of cornbread. Right? Her marginal benefit for one more thing of cornbread was higher than mine. So I said, here you go. It wasn't zero for mine. I wanted the cornbread, but I don't know. She just loves cornbread, especially hers. It's really good. Okay? So here you go. I had something else. See, there was an increase in the overall benefit there because her gain was more than my loss. Okay, so equal marginal benefits is an efficiency rule for multiple providers of something, and then equal marginal costs on the other side. Okay, so back to this slide here. I mean, not back to it, that's what we were talking about. Command and control is inefficient because it's very difficult. No, let me rephrase that. Downright impossible for the government to mandate quantities that by some amazing coincidence cause the marginal costs to all be the same. And even if they could, even if they had the knowledge of at what quantity, 10% for you, 20% for you, 50% for you, even if they had that knowledge, they would struggle within our legal system of saying, look, your marginal costs are lower, I'm going to make you do 5 times as much as you. Thanks for making me do 5 times as much, spending 5 times as much maybe, or not quite maybe 2 times as much to get done 5 times, but still, imposing double the cost on them as on them. That's going to end up in the courtroom real fast. Okay, so command and control is inherently inefficient. I know from my study of environmental economics, that's one of my 2 main fields. Yeah, he's really into this stuff, yes. That the last time I checked this number, and it may have changed, we were spending about 3 times as much as economists had estimated it would cost with efficiency to achieve our environmental gains. Okay, in other words, the environmental improvement that we enjoy through government intervention in markets costs through command and control regulation about 3 times as much as it would cost by other means. Wow. Considering that's about 2 or 3% of GDP, that's some serious cash that we're going, oops, that's not a very good imitation of a toilet flushing. But anyway, pour several $100 billion in a toilet, wow, gone. So that's what inefficiency means. It sounds like inefficiency. Well, yeah, well, we're talking real money. Right? We're talking real wealth. In the United States, we're lucky, we're a wealthy country. In some other countries, the inefficiency is the difference between life and starvation. Here it's, okay, I don't get to have quite as many nice things as I otherwise would have. Yeah, it costs a little more to heat and cool and drive, and so I can't have some other things that I would like to have. It still hurts, okay? But some places it hurts a lot more than it hurts here. Again, Q&A is good. Okay, so I think I just talked about this. I don't like to read slides, but I like to have them up here just to kind of ease your note-taking burden and to show you what I think I discussed, and so you can read it and say, but Doc, I don't remember you saying anything about that. Better do it if that's the thought going through your head. See, and then it says down at the bottom there, that was something that I added to this slide, the last little bullet there, because I was thinking, as I was doing this in my office upstairs, we went over some of this stuff in Chapter 7. We talked about the price system and how the price system works so much more effectively and quickly and efficiently than a central planning process. Yeah, applies directly here. We don't want to throw away hundreds of billions of dollars to improve the environment. We want to do it as cheaply as possible. Let's do it through the price system. Right? If we do it through command and control, then we better do like the Clean Air Act and add on some trading at the end there, so that the high cost pollution sources can pay low cost pollution reduction sources to assume some of their emissions and have a win-win situation, like in that 50-80 situation. Right? The firm with the $80 marginal cost pays $60 to the firm with the $50 marginal cost, and they both go, yeah, all right. Well, the one makes $10 and the other one saves $20. Okay, and the air is just as clean as it was before. Okay, one of the reasons that it's inefficient there is that second bullet from the bottom. When the government does this command and control thing, quite often to seem fair, instead of making everybody do the same thing, which doesn't look fair either because the firms are different, what they do is specify how to do something and make everybody do it the same way, which from an efficiency perspective is even worse, right? Because it takes away the flexibility for unique entities to figure out how to get something done that works best for them. But assigning that through a command and control framework doesn't look fair, right? The different ways of doing things. Okay, so you will all install the best available control technology. Doesn't that sound great if you listen to the news? Yeah, all right, they're all going to be, reduce their emissions as much as current technology allows. Well, who can possibly know what the best available control technology is for every single pollution source out there and know it continuously? In other words, as it changes with the new technologies. And then if you're one of those pollution sources and you just installed was the best available control technology yesterday and it changes, you do this and you go, oh my goodness, now the government's going to make me tear out what I just spent billions or millions of dollars to install because now it's obsolete and they're going to make me install something else. Okay? So again, flexibility is important. Give them an overall goal, tradable allowances. Okay? We're going to reduce emissions this much. Here's your initial responsibility to kick into that, but you can trade and increase your responsibility if somebody else pays you to do it, and you can buy down your responsibility if you get somebody else to up theirs. Okay, you can figure out any way you want to do it, right? Rather than having to do what somebody at the EPA thinks is your best available control technology. By the way, when I was first coming out on the job market, this is frightening, back in the 1980s with my PhD, that was one of the job interviews that I did, was with the EPA. I think what they wanted the applicant to do, if they were hired, was to figure out the best available control technology for the textile industry, or for some part of the textile industry. So I was going to, if I'd been offered that job and taken it, I would have been the central planner in effect for the textile industry. Figuring out some way, knowing the technology of producing clothing and other things, other textiles, figuring out how best for them to reduce their emissions down to some lower level, but not zero. Now, you think John Merrifield coming out of University of Wyoming, 29 years old with his PhD, is suddenly going to know the cotton business better than people that have been in it all their lives? Not going to happen, okay? Best of intentions, study day and night, no way am I going to know their business as well as they know it. But I'm going to tell them, under the command and control, how to do their business, because if I impose a certain pollution control technology, that's going to affect everything probably about how they can function. The EPA today has enough authority within the law to pretty much centrally plan the economy if they had enough budget and enough staff to do all the enforcing. Let's not let them do that. From an efficiency perspective, that would, at least from an efficiency perspective, that would be a disaster. Now, there are cases where command and control is efficient, and that is, based on the discussion that we just had, where you might surmise is, well, all this stuff is about trading. What if you don't want to trade any amount? What if the amount should be zero? When should it be zero? Well, if it's really toxic stuff. You don't want to have tradable allowances for plutonium emissions. No. Little bitty amount, many deaths. Botulism. You know, we want the quantity to be zero, or as close to microscopically, very, very tiny. Okay, we're not going to get exactly to zero, but we're going to make this into a police story, right? We're going to follow this stuff very carefully, command and control at every stage, because if any of it leaks out anywhere, thousands of people are going to die. And we're going to do command and control. We're not going to have a tradable allowance to do something deadly. Okay, but carbon dioxide, we inhale that all the time, but global warming says that there's too much of it. We can't go to zero, otherwise we'd all have to strangle ourselves and stop breathing. But the amount might be excessive, we might want to lower it. Nobody's talking about command and control for doing something about greenhouse gases, okay? Because it would just be so unbelievably inefficient that we wouldn't be able to do it politically. Okay, so cap and trade, you might have heard that phrase, tradable allowances in carbon dioxide and other emissions that are believed to be related to climate change and global warming. Okay, so command and control is on the menu, and it's the best item on the menu at times, but it's very efficient for most things, for anything where the quantity should be more than zero. Okay, so here's the slide where it actually talks about the tradable allowances. Again, how does the tradable allowances work? Let's say the uncontrolled emissions in the free market is, say, 500 tons per day, okay, of some bad stuff, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, something that we think there's too much of and it's policy relevant because doing something about it would cost less than the benefits of doing something about it. Okay, so we're at 500, free market, no emission controls, nothing, and we think based on marginal benefits and costs that we should reduce that 500 by 200. Okay, so we want to have emission reductions of 200. So what do? We issue 300 allowances, each allowing its owner 1 ton of emissions. Okay? 500, we want to reduce that by 200. Reducing 500 by 200 brings it down to 300. That's what we want to allow. Allowances. Okay? So we subtract the reduction that we want to get from the status quo before there are any reductions, the 500, and we issue allowances for what's left, the amount we want to allow. Want is a strong term. Do we really want any emissions? No, we don't want them. Okay, but the 200, where does that come from? Up to that point, additional emission reduction is worth more than it costs to do it. Beyond that point, additional emission reductions are not worth less, but they are worth less than the cost of achieving them. Okay, and we're not talking about we're going to let some people drop dead because the air's no. We're talking about, on a bad day we can only see 5 miles instead of 8. Okay, that's damage. That's regrettable. Okay, it's worth something to achieve maximum visibility, crystal clear, but it's not worth the GDP, right, to do that. Depending on how much it costs, it might be worth it. If it costs a lot, it might not be worth it. Okay, we're going to live with the visibility being a little lower than it otherwise would be because it would cost $1 gazillion to fix it, and it isn't worth $1 gazillion to do it. Okay, so we start off at the 500. Not acceptable, too many bad things going on. We determine that some reductions could be achieved that would be worth more than it costs to do that, and we'll issue allowances for the remaining amount. Want, again, is that we feel we ought to allow based on the cost of achieving additional emission reductions. Okay, ponder what you just heard. Write it down somewhere in your own words that you think it'll mean something to you when you study it in a couple of weeks. All right, your next exam is November 24th. Okay, so think about the words as you write them down and what you'll be able to connect to 2 weeks down the road, right? See, because I get emails all the time, says, Doc, you delivered a great lecture, they're trying to be nice, and maybe it was. I understood it perfectly when I left class, and then there wasn't my homework, and, or on the test, I didn't get it anymore. Well, what does that mean? Well, among other things, it means that maybe, a little better note taking, okay, so that you nail that down. Or maybe you were doing that river in Africa thing, and you just thought, because I presented it well, hopefully, that it made sense. Yeah, you had it. No, you didn't really, right? What's that river in Africa thing? Denial is not just a river in Africa. Only it's not spelled N-I-L-E, right? That's the river, of course. D-E-N-I-A-L, denial, kind of a word play. I love word plays. Double meaning, it's fun. And remember, the fun never ends unless you let it. Always have, well, not always, almost always. Sometimes somebody else makes the fun end. Don't you let it end. Okay, so allowance trading means that we can achieve whatever it is we want to achieve at minimum cost because the different pieces of the overall puzzle are motivated by cost savings to do the trading that gets those marginal costs to be equal. There's no way the government can mandate the MC equal outcome, but it happens naturally through people pursuing self-interest, that invisible hand thing, if we allow trading. Okay, so I'll just leave this up here for a minute for you to be able to, for you to read it and see if, he just did talk about that. Yeah, I understand what that means. Or, Doc, you may have thought you just talked about that, but I'm looking at this and I don't understand what it means. Okay, so here's the thing about the Clean Air Act of 1990 that I jumped the gun on a few slides ahead, but it's okay, I think. Okay, so firms may trade allowances as they see fit, but there has to be a monitoring authority and monitoring enforcement that says, hey, according to our ledger, you started off with 50 allowances and you sold 10 of those, now you only have 40. We just measured your emissions at 45. That's a violation. No, you can't do that. Punishment, fines, maybe jail time. Okay, see, that's what we mean by that second to last bullet there. Firms can have whatever amount of allowances that they want to have based on buying and selling them, but then they have to live with that quantity. Of course, we don't require them to emit as much as they have allowances for. If you have 40 allowances, you're perfectly free to emit 35 or 30 or 20 or nothing. And by the way, one of the nice aspects of this tradable allowance system is, what if you're Sierra Club or Natural Resources Defense Council or one of the big environmental groups, and you disagree? You disagree with the amount allowed, like the example that I did in words a minute ago, 500, let's get that down to 300. Think, no, that's way too many. No, 300, that's too many. Do a fundraiser and buy some of them up and take them up. Having an allowance, permission to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. The EPA is not going to knock on your door and say, hey, if you got 5 allowances, where's those emissions? Crank them out. No. Yeah, if you do more than your amount, they'll pay you a visit. Say, hey, this allowance system isn't going to work if we allow people to emit more than they have an allowance for. Okay? So, those who have a stronger sense of damage or environmental sense don't agree with the political consensus about how far to reduce emissions, go up, buy allowances, tear them up, throw them away. Okay, reduce the amount in circulation. So 500, the government gets that down to 300, okay, and then the Sierra Club goes up and buys 50 of those, and now we're down to 250. And as you notice from the chapter, the initial price at which the allowances went into effect was much higher than later. Why was that? Because of the cost of the allowances provided a motivation to figure out ways to reduce the emission control costs. You could sell off your allowances and make profit. Okay, so there was so much of that that the price of the allowances went way down, and that meant that environmental groups or anybody could go bargain hunting. Wow, for that much we can reduce the emission levels? Yeah. We don't have to ask the government to do anything. We don't have to lobby anybody. We just have to write a check and, oh, they're really cheap. Yeah. Cheap because of free enterprise, the desire to make a profit, to sell the allowances at the market price, and to achieve the emission reductions necessary, right, to be able to sell off allowances, produce lower prices. And so we have a result like this, where electricity generation is, of course, up with population and income, but the amount of SO2 emissions are down. Okay, the allowances went way down in cost, and so they were bought off at these bargain basement prices. So that in 2005 or 6, where the graph ends there was a lot less sulfur oxide, sulfur dioxide produced, sulfur dioxide as a byproduct of producing electricity than before. Okay, I think I'm just going to leave the check yourself for you because I'm doing marginal analysis and it says I've got 14 minutes left and we've got some top hat questions, so let's do those. And before we do that, let's do attendance real fast, since everybody's here for sure that's going to be here. So there we go. And if I forget at the end of the period to push all the questions that we're going to have into your folder, somebody, but Doc, you forgot to push them over and remind me to do that. There are days when I am the epitome of the absent-minded professor. There are days, most days probably. All right, going once. I get in there, we're taking time away from the questions here. Okay, going, maybe that's all that's here today, given the rain, the fact that you can watch this later online. All right. Yes? Oh, I thought I heard somebody say I have a question. All right, there we go. And while you're pondering that, let me just remind you that I sent out, I think, a couple emails yesterday. So if you didn't get them, send me an email and check your spam filter. Send me an email that says, Doc, I didn't get those, and I'll send them to you. One was about extra credit opportunity, and I'm pretty sure I sent out a second one at the moment. I can't remember what it was about. It was important, of course. All right, marginal analysis says I've got to do some more questions, so going once, going twice, gone. All right, so if you remember that stuff I wrote up on the board last time, and to a lesser extent reminded you of this time, until this chapter we assumed that markets were efficient, which means we implicitly assumed that there weren't any spillovers, and also that the markets were competitive. Okay, but the context of this question, the efficiency of the equilibrium depends on, among a couple of other things, no external costs or benefits. All right? I'll forego the little bar graph just in the interest of time. See, and a good example of that marginal benefit thing, if you'd done something to not get that cold, so you wouldn't be spreading it to other people now. Now, it being the common cold, there might not have been anything you could have done about it. Oh well. All right, going once, going twice, it's going up there pretty fast, so, oh, stopped. Show answer. Okay, so this graph right here on your left is the answer to this question. Tax equal to the, I'm tempted here on this one. Oh boy. Let's go back. Okay. Cost is the key term there, right? So no subsidies to address external costs. Subsidy would make it worse, right? People would do even more of the thing that's generating the cost. Okay, so click on this graph. Whoa, that was fast. Somebody just jumped right on that. Wow. Was that an oops? Or just I better register that I was here today, or I don't know. Shouldn't take too long to answer this one, so we'll not allow too much time here, but do click on the graph. In case you didn't know you could do that, it'll get bigger, see it better. Okay, those who are struggling are probably not going to get it because this is like an instant answer if you know it. Should be anyway. Let me get rid of this off of here. Annoying to have that there. All right, so we pulled the graph up. MSC minus MPC is how large the tax should be, and just starting on the y-axis there, you can tell it's 10 minus 6 or 4. Okay, so that's why I said it's an instant answer. You're either going to see that right away, or you're just not on the right track and you're not going to see it for a while at least. Okay, anybody want to talk about it and say, Doc, I see it on the board, I see it on the screen, I'm still not getting it. You're possibly in good company. Let's talk, because if you're not getting the first part of this graph, the 5 here and the 4 up there, when it comes time to the homework and the test, you're going to miss a bunch of questions. All right, because if you don't get that, you're not going to get the dead weight loss question, you're not going to get the revenue question. Okay, several. So you absolutely positively need to be getting this one. Let's see how we're doing on that account. I'll go up here and look at this real quick. Okay, pretty good, but still, where did 3 come from? I know where the 3 possibly came from. Although I don't have the graph up there anymore. Also 2, let's take a quick look at that. The 3, let's see, that was the, the 3 is, that's the change in the prices. See, that's different. That's not the same as the marginal external cost. If you did the 3, I'm guessing that you took 16 minus 13. No. The 2, I'm not sure where that came from. I don't see anything there that's different by 2. Maybe you took the 4 and divided by 2, because for a dead weight loss, we divide by 2. So you're getting kind of tossed salad of things, which means you're trying to memorize stuff and not understand it. So cut that out. Okay, just taking some wild guesses there to see if that helps. Let us move on because we have other questions to ask. Okay, same graph. There it is again to click on. Any of these are important enough to spend the rest of the period discussing if that helps, rather than just get through more of them. After all, we can start Tuesday with finishing this if we need to. However, Tuesday we will be getting into chapter 11. So again, the oppressive marginal analysis. Spending more time on this, it does take time away from other things. But any question is worth the time to address, because it takes time away from me blabbering, which I have no idea whether it's of value or not clarifying something or clarifying something it's already clear. All right, given the interests of time. This is another one of those that should be pretty quick if you've got it. Okay, so there, where does the 18 come from? It's the difference between the 100 and the 118. The 100 is the optimum and the 118 is the equilibrium. So that's the difference there, the 18 tons, the degree to which the free market equilibrium exceeds the social optimum. Are you discovering perhaps some struggle with the terminology still? Yes?
How did you decide which one was the equal?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the equilibrium is where MPC is equal to MPB, and so that would be where it says S, MPC. See, the supply line will always be what people are willing to supply at different prices will always be a function of what are the costs to the producer, okay, MPC. Now, if we internalize the externalities, then those also become costs to the producer, and then the MPC becomes the MSC. But the equilibrium is the 118 because that's the quantity at which the benefits, private benefits, equal to private costs at the margin. Okay, and then the 100 is where the social marginal benefit equals the social marginal cost. Okay, good. See, the reason I went for the thumb there is because sometimes the thank you is, okay, I don't get it, but I'm not gonna go on. so the thumbs up is I got it. Okay, there's a difference. All right, next. Okay, a dead tax in this case is the $4 tax, but you don't need the diagram to answer this question. Okay, when you miss one of these, make sure you analyze the basis of it. Was it terminology that you were unclear on? What was the reason? Okay, and then you know what to do about it. So let's disable, show answer. There we go. And let's see, how many do we have left? I made 5. Well, we got 5 more to do at the beginning of next time. So that answer B was what was discussed earlier, and again, I mentioned that only because then you get to think about whether you did or didn't understand it and why, what we discussed earlier. Right? This money that we generate, the $350 over here, has 2 uses: mitigating damages and compensation. See, some of you think, oh, that's what you were talking about then. Yeah, now that you've seen it here in a different form. All righty, we got 5 left to go. Those questions, those will be right at the beginning next time, and then we'll jump into chapter 11. If you're reading ahead, by all means, go ahead and read chapter 12, but we're going to skip it here. It's a real short chapter, so you'll learn something. But our next chapter after next week is 11, and the week after is 13.